Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's webinar on the local government pension scheme and shared cost additional voluntary contributions. This webinar is hosted by AVCs, and if I introduce myself to you first of all, as you will guess from the slide, my name's Stephen Black. I'll have 21 years this year experience of working with the local government pension scheme, most of that time spent with Prudential, and I'm sure some of you in the call today have been to presentations with me in the past when I worked for Prudential, but I'm now working for AVCs, and it's AVCs that's been appointed by your respective employers to administer an employee benefit called a salary sacrifice shared cost additional voluntary contribution, or shared cost AVCs for short. Horrible terminology, I know, but we'll get to grips with that a little bit later. Now, we're going to cover today. Well, I'm going to give you an overview of the local government pension scheme, or LGPS for short. One of the options you have to improve your benefits are additional voluntary contributions, AVCs for short. And today, what we're going to talk about the two things that are unique to the local government AVC, which you can't do in any of the other public sector schemes. Now, usual things from me, all the information that I'm giving you today is based on current taxation, legislation, scheme rules and HMRC practice, all of which can change in the future. The information in the webinar is factual information only. It's not financial advice. You should always consider your own circumstances. If you're in any doubt, see a financial advisor. But hopefully I'll get you to the place today of putting you in an informed position where you can make some informed decisions going forward. So the hour-long session broken down into these main areas here. I'll give you an overview of your main LGPS benefits and how those benefits can be calculated. Sarah's our case study for today. We'll look at her benefits at normal pension age and also what happens if she retires early. We'll talk about the two ways in local government you have of paying in more to improve your benefits. And that's where the second thing that we'll look at there is shared cost additional voluntary contributions. So we'll look at what's unique about those, how they work, the benefits of accessing your shared cost AVC at the same time as your main scheme, local government benefits, but also what happens if you need access to money before you take your main LGPS benefits. We'll look at some options and limits, and then how you go about applying for AVCs after today, and then the support that's available to you following the webinar. So let me give you an overview of LGPS first of all. So security. What happens if your scheme was to go bust? Well, actually, you don't need to worry about that. You're protected under an Act of Parliament, under statute, the government guarantee to pay you the benefits that you're due when you retire. So safe and secure a scheme as you can hope to get. Certainly nowhere near the same safety and security in private sector that you enjoy in a public sector scheme. And that just means you get a guaranteed pension when you retire, payable for your lifetime. Not only that, it goes up in line with inflation. So you have what's called an index-linked pension. And I'm sure some of you have had people say to you in the past, well, it's all right for you. You work for the council, for example, you get a great pension where you are, and it's because you get this index-linked pension. Cracking part of your scheme. And it's that type of pension that private sector have walked away from because they say it's too costly. A benefit of paying into the scheme on the basis that you're a taxpayer, well, you get tax relief in your contributions. If you don't make it to retirement, hopefully you know 3 times salary gets paid out as a death and service lump sum, and on top of that, dependents' pensions can be payable too. Your employer pays the vast majority of the contributions towards providing all the benefits that you see on this slide. Your contribution rates have changed over the years. Now it's dependent on your salary, so the more you earn, the more you pay, the less you earn, the less you pay. But the average member rate is about 6% or 7% of salary. You can check it from your payslip. The employer contribution rate, that can vary from scheme to scheme and employer to employer, but on average, your employer will pay close to about 20%, maybe around 19 is typically the average. So a really sizable cost for the employer. Something called flexible retirement, and your employer will have a policy on this. Flexible retirement is an option whereby from the age of 55, you can reduce your hours and your salary on one hand, but carry on working and at the same time access your pension. But you need employer's consent for that. So that's something you would speak to your boss or HR about. Should you not be able to afford to be in the scheme, then under old rules, you had to come out the scheme. Whereas now what you can do is elect for the 50-50 option. Rather than you coming out the scheme altogether, you can pay half the contribution to receive half the benefit. Different tiers of ill health, which are quite in-depth, so hopefully this doesn't apply to you, but should you want to look at ill health protection, there are different tiers then, and I'll be sharing with you a website later on where you can find out more about that. Those of you that have been around local government for long enough, so prior to the 1st of April 2009, will maybe remember that you get a pension in respect of the service up to the 31st of March 2009, but not only that, not only do you get a pension in respect of that service, you also get an automatic tax-free lump sum. Which leads us on nicely to the next slide. Let's look at how your benefits are calculated. And depending on when you joined the scheme, your benefits in the local government scheme could be calculated a total of 3 ways. Let's look at the current scheme. So the current LGPS was introduced 1st of April 15, and the type of scheme that you're in is a care scheme, a career average revalued earnings scheme. And the type of care scheme that you're in is the 49th scheme. What on earth does that all mean? Well, what it means is every year there's a calculation done. And every year, the pension fund looks at your pensionable salary and say, right, we'll take 1/49th of your pensionable salary each year, and that gets banked for you. So this is what's been happening in the last 6 years almost. So a 49th of each year's salary, that gets banked each and every year. It doesn't stand still. It gets revalued in line with inflation, consumer price index. So hopefully it goes up all those individual years, and come retirement from the age of 55 onwards, they all get added together, and that gives you your annual pension. But of course, some of you have been in local government prior to the 1st of April 2015. So let's look at the 2 previous schemes that existed. So from 2009 to 2015, you were also in the local government pension scheme. It wasn't a care scheme that you were in, it was a final salary scheme that you were in. And the type of final salary scheme that you were in was the 60th scheme. So you've spent a maximum of 6 years, so from 2009 to 2015, in the 60th scheme. Which just means then, come retirement, there's one calculation that gets done in a final salary scheme. What is your pensionable salary at retirement? Or what's the full-time equivalent of it if you happen to be working part-time? So let's assume you've got 6 years in the 60th scheme. That means you'll get 6/60ths of your final pensionable salary at retirement as an extra lot of pension. Notice the difference between final salary and the care scheme. In the care scheme, every year a calculation gets done. It's a 49th of each year's salary. Whereas in a final salary scheme, what's important is the pensionable salary in the 365 days up to retirement. That's what's important. Or as I mentioned, the full-time equivalent of it if you happen to be working part-time. And there'll be some of you on the call today who joined local government prior to 1st of April 2009, in which case you were also in a final salary scheme. It was the 80th scheme that you were in. Now, I'm going to pluck a number out the sky at the moment. Let's imagine you've got 10 years in the 80th scheme. That means you'll get 10 80ths of your final pensionable salary at retirement as pension. But not only that, in addition to the pension that you get in the 80th scheme, you automatically get 3 times that pension as a one-off tax-free lump sum. So it's only in the 80th scheme do you get an automatic tax-free lump sum. So let's bring this to life. Let's introduce you to Sarah. She's our case study for today. She has a normal pension age of 67. We're assuming she has a pensionable salary at retirement of 29,311. Sarah has 1 year in the 80th scheme, 6 years in the 60th scheme, We're anticipating she'll have 18 years in the 49 scheme, add all of that up, and it tells me she can expect an annual pension of 14,277 and a one-off tax-free lump sum automatically of £1,106. Remember, where does that automatic tax-free lump sum come from? It's only ever as a result of years in the 80th scheme. Sarah only has 1 year, which is why her tax-free lump sum is really quite low. Some of you in the call today will have more years in the 80th scheme. I would expect your lump sum to be much bigger. Some of you don't have any years in the 80th scheme, in which case your automatic tax-free lump sum is zero. Now, there'll be some of you looking at this slide and thinking, 67, stuff that, I don't want to work until then. Sarah's no different. What we'll look at in this slide is the impact of Sarah retiring early at 64 instead of 67. Now, of course, your benefits will be worth less at 64 than 67 because you'll have 3 years fewer in the scheme. But on top of that, if you choose to retire earlier than your normal pension age, then yes, your benefits will be worth less because you've got fewer years in the scheme, but you also face actuarial reductions on the benefits that you have built up to. What's an actuarial reduction? Well, essentially, it's a penalty. If you choose to retire earlier than normal pension age, your benefits are getting paid out early, which means they now have to be paid for longer in retirement. So to reflect that, those benefits are reduced. So it's a double whammy. If you choose to retire early, pension will be less because you've got fewer years in the scheme and you're facing actuarial reductions. And the combination of those things means for Sarah, instead of having the pension of 14,200 at 67, she can expect a pension of 10,253 at 64. She loses £4,000 off her annual pension. Our tax-free lump sum's affected a little bit, but not significantly. The main impact is on the pension. And this is where there's a carrot dangled in front of you in local government to say, look, you can retire early, you can choose to go as young as 55 if you want. Yeah, it's all very well saying that, but the combination of having fewer years in the scheme plus actuarial reductions means for a lot of people, well, they just simply can't afford to retire as young as what they otherwise would. Okay, now that I've depressed you, we will move on and we'll go on and talk about the ways in which you can pay in more to try and improve your benefits for retirement or to try and help you retire early. So I'm going to come on to additional voluntary contributions, but first of all, let's talk about something else, additional pension contributions, APCs for short. What are APCs? Well, essentially, in its simplest form, this is a contract you enter into with your local government pension scheme. And if you paid a fixed amount of money from salary for a fixed period of time, it means you get a fixed increase to your index-linked pension that then goes up in line with inflation. You may need to go for a medical because if you suffer ill health or die, the pension fund makes good in this contract, so they want to be satisfied that you're likely to last the distance here before allowing you to buy more index-linked pension. Now, you know now, if you never knew before, and I'm sure you did, having an index-linked pension is valuable, but stuff that's valuable doesn't come cheap. And if you think about it just now, for every 1 year of pension that you build up currently, maybe relies on you paying around 6% of your salary, but with maybe around 19% coming from your employer. So for every 1 year of pension, it costs in the region of about 25% of your salary to pay for it. That's why private sector have walked away from this type of pension. They say it's too costly. So if you choose to buy more index-linked pension, clearly you've not got that contribution from the employer. You're paying all of it on your own. For that reason, the take-up rate of APCs is tiny. Yes, you get tax relief on your contributions on the assumption that you're a taxpayer. Yes, you're buying a benefit that will increase in line with inflation, but it's just not flexible. This is a contract effectively you take out to normal pension age. If you retire earlier than that, you're facing actuarial reductions. You can't reduce your contributions. You can only stop them, receive a pro rata benefit, and then you would need to take out a new contract instead of being able to restart them. Now, it will take you 2 minutes to get a quote on this cost of buying index-linked pension. Go into your local government pension scheme website, go into the APC calculator that sits there, put in your details. It will spit out a quote as to what it would cost you to buy, say, £1,000 of annual index-linked pension, and you'll then work out really quickly you would need to rely on living so long in retirement to recoup in pension what you've outlaid in the period that you've been working. As I say, for that reason, take-up rate is really low. Now, before we move on, I'm going to take you back a few years when the government changed some rules in pension. And what they were trying to do was simplify and standardise all the different types of pension schemes in the UK on one hand, and on the other hand, encourage people to save more for retirement. Because generally speaking, we don't save enough, yet on average, we're living longer. So the encouragement for us to save more was that we would be allowed to take more out as a tax-free lump sum. So whichever pension scheme you belong to in the UK now, you can get 25% of the benefits out as a tax-free lump sum, which is much greater than what was allowed under the old rules. Now, just to give you forewarning, I'm going to stop at the end of this slide and invite James in to pick up any questions that have come through. So you know now you can get a quarter of your benefits tax-free, and some of you on the call who joined local government after 31st of March 09, you don't get any automatic lump sum. Those of you who've got service prior to the 1st of April 2009 in the old 80th scheme, then yes, you get an automatic lump sum, but it comes nowhere near this limit that you're allowed to have. So how do you go about getting a bigger tax-free lump sum? Well, one option you've got is come retirement, is you can start to reduce your index-linked pension. You can bring down your pension on one hand, and in exchange for doing that, your tax-free lump sum, on the other hand, goes up until you reach your limit. That works in a ratio of 1 to 12 called the commutation rate. So I want you to put yourselves in the position that you're retiring today at 60, and in the position to say, right, well, I'll give up 1,000 of pension, and if I'm doing that, my tax-free lump sum goes up to 12,000. Few things to bear in mind though with that. Of course, if you're retiring at 60, you're retiring earlier than normal pension age. So your pension's reduced because you've got fewer years in the scheme, and it's reduced further because you're facing actuarial reductions. On top of that, you're expected to live now until your mid-80s. So if you were giving up 1,000 of pension to increase your lump sum by 12,000, that's now 1,000 of pension you're giving up this year, next year, every year for 20 odd years that would be going up in line with inflation. And the pensioners in local government have seen their pension go up around 20% in the last 10 years alone. Never mind, say 20 odd years that you might be alive when you retire. So giving up index-linked pension for lump sum at a rate of 1 to 12 is a really poor exchange unless you can guarantee that you would die early in retirement. Then you would say, give me the bigger tax-free lump sum because I'm not going to be around to collect a pension for that long. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, wouldn't it be nice to have both? Get a bigger tax-free lump sum, but without damaging your index-linked pension to do it? Well, that's the stuff that I'm going to move on to shortly. But before we do that, we'll invite James in to pick up any questions.
Hi, Steve. Yes, we've had one from Joel, actually, that had to get my grey matter working from my 2-year term as a trustee director at the Prudential Staff Pension Scheme, where he's asked, how have local authorities been able to afford such good pensions compared to the private sector? Well, it's a bit of a convoluted answer, Joel, but effectively, the kind of pension you're in is effectively a promise to pay you a salary in the future, and that salary effectively is the pension. So in order to do that, what they've got to do is ensure there's enough money in the pot. So every 3 years, the pension funds have a valuation when they do 2 calculations. One calculation is, if everyone retired today, is there enough to pay everyone's pension today? And the answer is no, because there never is, because that would never happen. The second calculation they do is they they phase people's retirements and then look at saying, will there be enough money in the pot at the pension fund to pay those people's pensions? And if there isn't, then that's when they look at the employer contribution rate or make up how the scheme works, which is why the scheme has changed over the years. Now, the backstop you've got is the fact that the local government pension scheme is managed on a local basis. So there's not one national pot of money, there's localized pots of money, which means that those localized pots of money are managed by that local authority pension fund, and they take advice and have those valuations done on a year-by-year basis. Now, private sector have walked away from these kind of schemes because in the private sector, you've got shareholders to satisfy, and shareholders don't like debt. And if a company's trying to sell itself on the open market, it has to disclose what pensions debt it's got, i.e. promises to pay pensions in the future. So private sector will prefer just to give their employees some money and say, you go and sort your pension out yourself, rather than the risk being on us, because in private sector, as we know, there's lots of mergers and acquisitions. And that's something similar that Philip Green from Arcadia is having difficulty with. He's having difficulty selling his group, Arcadia, because of the pensions debt. It can strip it down and sell bits of it, but not the whole group. So in the private sector, they've walked away because of those risks these schemes are associated with. In the public sector, because it's managed so carefully and localized, that's how they've managed to continue offering this valuable benefit for you. So bit of a technical answer there. Hopefully it's answered it for you, but there are no other questions, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, James. I think that's the longest answer you've ever given to one of these questions, James.
Well, Jonathan, one of our other colleagues, he likes to talk a bit. I think I got
right. So let's crack on. So I was.
Thank you, by the way. So there you go.
So I was, yes. So I was saying there, wouldn't it be nice to have both get a bigger tax-free lump sum without damaging your pension? Actually, you can do that in local government. And there's two things in this slide that I'm going to talk about that's unique to local government. There's two things you can do in your scheme that you can't do in any of the other public sector schemes. And the first thing that you're able to do with the additional voluntary contribution part, the AVC part of your scheme, is use that as the vehicle to give yourself a bigger tax-free lump sum so that you're getting more tax-free, but without having to reduce your pension at a rate of 1 to 12 doing it. So essentially best of both worlds. Now, I just wonder how many of you knew that already, this ability to take your AVC as a tax-free lump sum, because I describe that as a huge deal for you. A lot of you in the call today work for councils. Teachers can't do what you can do. You're the only public sector scheme that allows that. Now, two caveats to that are, one, taking your AVC as a tax-free lump sum means taking it at the same time as when you retire with your main scheme benefits. And two, there's always a limit as to what you can have in your AVC as a tax-free lump sum, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But you all know now, if you never knew before, then up to your limit, when you retire with main scheme benefits, you can take the whole AVC back as a tax-free lump sum instead of having to reduce your pension doing it. Now, if you don't want to take your AVC as a tax-free lump sum, you don't have to. You still retain the flexibility. You can use your AVC fund at retirement to buy you a pension, an annuity. You can do that if you want. And what's the advantage of paying AVCs to give you a tax-free lump sum as opposed to putting your money into an ISA? Well, the advantage is you get tax relief on your contributions. AVCs you pay from salary, so on the basis that that you pay tax, you get tax relief on your contributions. So if you pay tax at 19% or 20 or 21 or 41, you'll get tax relief at that level. Now, I mentioned there was two things unique about local government. The AVC, the second thing relates to the second headline in this slide. You'll see there this salary sacrifice shared cost additional voluntary contribution. What does that mean? In simple terms, what it means is that not only can you get tax relief in your contributions, but you also get to save in national insurance as well. Okay, and again, none of the other public sector schemes allow that. What does that mean? Let's look at a simple example. Supposing you're the basic rate taxpayer. So you're paying tax at 20%. That means you get 20% tax relief on your contributions. But not only do you save tax at 20%, you also save in national insurance at 12%. So just imagine if some of you will have ISAs, individual savings account, if they were saying, look, save £100 a month with us, how much would it cost you to save £100 a month with them? Well, of course, the answer is £100. How much does it cost you as a basic rate taxpayer to save £100 in a shared cost AVC? It costs you £68.12 to do that, because you're saving tax and you're saving national insurance. Now, just imagine if your bank or ISA provider was saying, look, save £68.12 a month with us, and for doing that, we'll top it up to £100. They would need to give you an increase to your money of 46.8%, which clearly isn't going to happen. But that's how your AVC works in local government, and the fact that you work for employers who have set the local government AVC up in this shared cost basis. I get the fact in your bank you can go back tomorrow and get the money back out. That's your trade-off. Okay, putting money away for retirement, you can't touch it until 55 at the very earliest. But you get to save the tax and national insurance. So we'll work through an example here, and I'll invite James in at the end again for questions, and then we'll crack on through until the end. So this is Joe earns $30,000 a year. First column assumes he doesn't pay AVCs, so he pays his standard LGPS contribution of $151.88, standard tax of $262, standard NI of $205. He's left with a net pay of $1,881. Straightforward. Joe here decides he wants to contribute £250 a month to his AVC. Perhaps he wants to retire early, but he works for an employer like you do, who have set up the local government AVC in a shared cost basis via salary sacrifice. What does that mean? So let's get to grips with the terminology. A shared cost AVC is one where both you as the employee and your employer, you both contribute, you share in the cost. And your share in that cost is always regarded as £1 per month, with the balance treated as the employer's contribution. So Joe here wants to save $250 a month, £1 treated as his money, $249 treated as the employer's contribution. Now, don't get too excited by that just yet, because of course your employer isn't just going to put money into your AVC out the goodness of their heart. What they get you to do is reduce your salary. You sacrifice some of your salary to the equivalent amount. So you'll notice Joe here, in the top line, his salaries come down from $2,500 to $2,251. His salaries come down by £249 a month. So he's given up £249 a monthly salary. The council or his employer takes that along with his £1 and sends the 250 into his AVC. Now, the most common question I get asked at this stage is, wait a minute, Stephen, is that not a bad idea? If I'm reducing my salary at the top end, will that not have an impact on my main local government benefits? And the answer to that is no, there is no impact on your main scheme benefits. If you think about it, it would be madness if there was to be any detriment to your main scheme benefits. Why would you do it? You wouldn't. So there's no impact on your main scheme benefits. You'll notice in the second column, Joe still pays $151.88 to his local government scheme. He still pays the same to get the same when he retires, because your main scheme benefits aren't calculated on the sacrifice salary. They're always calculated on the original salary, which for Joe is the $2,500 a month, which is called notional salary. So I hope that makes sense. So moving further down, he's putting in $250 a month. So Joe's in Scotland. He's an intermediate rate taxpayer, which means he's paying tax at 21%, which means he's entitled to 21% tax relief. And 21% of £250 is £52.50. So you'll notice his tax has come down from $262 to $209. He's saved $52.50 in tax. You'll also notice his national insurance has come down from 205 to 175. Why is that? Well, for the purposes of calculating national insurance, it is the 2251 salary that can be used to calculate his national insurance. And he's left with a net pay of £1,713. So although 250 is going to his AVC, he saved £52.50 in tax and £29.88 in national insurance, which means he's actually only giving up £167.62 from his take-home pay because of what he's saving in tax and NI. Now, on the subject of NI, the second most common question I get asked is, Stephen, wait a minute, if I'm reducing my national insurance, will that not have an impact on my state pension? The answer to that is it could if you reduced your salary, if you paid so much in shared cost AVCs that you reduced your salary to below an annual limit of 6,240 a year, called the lower earnings limit, that could damage your state pension. So for that reason, you just wouldn't give up so much of your salary to reduce your salary below that 6,240 a year. But we can help you. Anyone that's looking to put in the maximum, we can work out what your limit is. Okay, so this is my most exciting message that I've got for you here. So I'm going to leave this on screen and invite James back in to pick up any questions.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, one question from Suzanne. Could this result in a shortfall of national insurance contributions? So I'll leave that for you to the end because you do cover that right at the end, don't you, on the conditions and considerations slide.
Okay, that's fine. That was a very short answer this time, James. Thank you. Okay, so let's crack on. How does your shared cost AVC work? Well, it's a benefit of employment. Has to be paid from salary. Your money goes into your AVC. You've got the flexibility to vary your contributions. So from £2 per month up the way. Your employer then sends your AVC contributions to their AVC provider. So whichever pension fund you belong to, they will have either Prudential as their AVC provider or Standard Life, or some pension funds actually you can choose between either one. The good news for you though is you've got control over how that insurance company invests your money, and I'm going to talk more about that just shortly, but essentially take as much or as little risk as you want. Then you've got the flexibility on the way out as to how you take the benefits from your AVC. So you could convert your AVC into a pension called an annuity, but remember, you're members of local government. You've got this unique thing whereby when you retire with main scheme benefits, then up to your limit, you can get the whole damn lot back out as a tax-free lump sum. That's the bit that's a huge deal for you. Okay, so this tends to be the pattern with AVCs. The younger you are, so the left-hand side, the younger you are, the longer your money is locked away, in which case there tends to be less paid at that point. There might be times you increase it, you might reduce it, you might stop it, and then closer to retirement, that's when we see a big spike in AVC contributions for two reasons. One, closer to retirement, you've maybe got more disposable income because the mortgage might be paid off, kids might be up and off your hands. But your bigger reason for putting more in closer to retirement, quite simply, is you're not waiting that long before you're due to get the money back. And I'm sure some of you in the call today know colleagues, or at the very least you've heard the stories of colleagues who close to retirement were maybe putting thousands of pounds per month into their AVC in local government. That is a really common thing in local gov, if, and it's a big if, I get that, if you can afford to do it. So we'll sometimes get people saying, oh, I'm retiring within the next year, is it worth it? And absolutely it is. It tends to be the folks closest to retirement who are the ones most likely to pay AVCs because they're not waiting that long before they're due to get the money back. Even this year already, I think the shortest AVC we've got set up is for someone who's paying in for 3 months. They're retiring on the 31st of March. So really common in local government, even if you're close to retirement. I mentioned that your money gets invested. And what your pension fund have done with Pru and Standard Life is they've looked at Pru and Standard Life's AVC funds and they've said, right, for our members, we want a range of those funds made available. So one end of the scale, so the top end, you've got the likes of stocks and shares. Usual health warnings from me when we talk about stocks and shares. Past performance not being a guide to future. Fund values can fall as well as rise. What you get back could be less than what you've paid in. And stocks and shares tends to suit somebody who's got 10, 20, 30 years to go before they're due to retire, that they don't mind investing their money in the stock market over such a long period in the hope that over that long period, their money in stocks and shares hopefully will outperform safer types of investments. No guarantee that it will, but that's what you're hoping for over a longer period of time. Conversely, there'll be a lot of people there who are saying, I don't want to take risk with my money. This is for my retirement. Or people who are maybe within, say, the last 5 years of retirement, saying, look, I want to protect all this tax and national insurance savings that I'm getting. I don't want to risk it, in which case they would maybe put their money into a minimal risk fund, which is typically a cash fund where it's much safer, much more secure, just not much opportunity for growth. Whatever you do, do not get hung up on fund choice, because your reason for paying AVCs in local government actually hasn't got much to do with the investment opportunity. Much more about trying to save tax, save national insurance, because you've got this other unique thing whereby when you retire with your main scheme benefits up to your limit, you can get it all back as a tax-free lump sum. Okay, you can't take this as advice from me. My wife, she works in local government. Clearly, I've got her paying AVCs, and she doesn't work for an employer that have set the AVC up in this shared cost basis. You work for employers who have, which means for us, or for her, my wife, she only gets tax relief. She doesn't get the national insurance savings. You get both. So hopefully it puts into perspective, don't get hung up on fund choice. If I can encourage you to do one thing after today, would be to go and look at a payslip and look at how much of your hard-earned income every month goes in tax and national insurance, and you probably don't think twice about it. Get that working for your own benefit. Okay, you don't have to have one fund. You can have up to 10, and of course you can change your mind, move money in and out these different funds as often as you want. Sarah, obvious example for someone who would pay AVCs because she wants to retire early. Watch and remember my depressing message from earlier. Choosing to retire early, you get hammered because you've got fewer years in the scheme plus the actuarial reductions. So paying AVCs, what we find is people will pay into an AVC to help them retire early, because the AVC then just helps cushion them from the impact of those reductions and having fewer years in the scheme. And because you can take the AVC as a tax-free lump sum, it helps you just bridge the gap, in Sarah's example, from 64 to 67, which is when her state pension kicks in. And because she can take the AVC as a tax-free lump sum, it just means she's got this chunk of money to spend when she's got the time and good health to spend it, whether that's going on holiday, replacing the car, spending time with the family, whatever it is, then she can do with that money whatever it is that she wants. So I've made quite a play today, and rightly, about take your AVC at the same time as your main scheme benefits, which you can do from 55, and doing that up to your limit, you can take the whole AVC as a tax-free lump sum. Now, you don't have to do that. If you don't want to, you could take some of it tax-free and use the remainder to buy an annuity. It's unlikely, but it's still an option. You could take some of it tax-free and use the remainder to buy more index-linked pension from your local government pension scheme. Again, it's unlikely, but it's still an option. You could do a combination of those things. Now, you'll see I've put a little website on the slide here, PensionWise. They have no relation to AVC-Wise, but PensionWise is a government-led body where you can get guidance on your retirement options. That's an impartial service available to you from the age of 50. Now, it's not so much there to be used with guiding you on what you can do with your main local government pension scheme benefits, but there'll be some of you who have maybe got old private pensions in the background, maybe prior to you joining local government. Pension-wise can help you get to grips with your options with maybe those old private pensions. Now, I've mentioned, right, take your AVC, same time as main scheme, up to your limit, 100% tax-free. What happens though if you wanted to access your AVC before you took your main scheme benefits? Well, you could do that, but doing that, if you take your AVC independent of main scheme, you can only get a quarter of the benefits tax-free. The other 3/4 is subject to tax. Whereas you've heard me say umpteen times now, taking it at the same time as main scheme, up to your limit, you can get the whole lot tax-free. So why would you take your AVC before your main scheme benefits if you can only get a quarter tax-free? Well, there's one good reason why you might do it, and it's on this slide here. So linking back into Sarah, remember when Sarah got to 64, her benefits were less because she'd fewer years in the scheme, but she was facing those actuarial reductions too. So what Sarah might do is get to 64, retire, but she might not touch her main scheme benefits until 67, which is when she can take them without the actuarial reductions. So for 3 years, she might just live off her AVC. And let's imagine for a wee second, she's got £48,000 in her AVC. And what she might choose to do is say, right, that's going to last me 3 years, so I'll take a third a year for 3 years whilst I wait on my main scheme benefits kicking in without the actuarial reductions. But because she's taken her AVC at a time other than with her main scheme, she can only get a quarter tax-free. The remainder is subject to tax. So if we look at each year, if she's taken out 16,000, a quarter she can get tax-free, 4,000. So the other 12,000 is then subject to tax. But let's think about that for a wee second, because you all have a personal allowance. There's an amount you earn each year up to which you pay no tax, and this year it's £12,500. So once Sarah had taken her 4,000 out, the 12,000 that's left is less than her personal allowance. So if that's her only source of income, although she'd pay tax on it immediately, she could go to the taxman and claim the tax back. So in a roundabout way, she does get it all tax-free. That's maybe your way around avoiding those actuarial reductions on your main scheme benefits should you retire early. It is an option. I still tend not to see that happen too often at all. What I still tend to see happen much more is even if someone wants to retire early, they'll retire, they'll take their main scheme benefits, because of course when you retire early, that's when your health is going to be at its best. So that's when you would want to have the money to do the things that you want to do, when you've got the time and good health to do them. I mentioned earlier there's always a limit as to what you can have in your AVC as a tax-free lump sum. Sarah's limit is 67,294. So anywhere up to that limit, retiring at 64 with her main scheme benefits, then she can get the whole AVC back as a tax-free lump sum. My other way of expressing this is at 64 for Sarah, she's got her pension of £10,253. That's what she's got. She's allowed a tax-free lump sum of £68,350 in local government. So she's allowed £68,350. She's getting £1,056 from the automatic lump sum from her 1 year in the 80th scheme. So the difference, the 67,294, that's what she can have in her AVC then. Anywhere up to that limit in her AVC, she can get the whole damn lot back as a tax-free lump sum, having had tax relief on her contributions and saved national insurance as well. So I hope that makes sense. The key thing for you in the call today, you might want to know how much can you have in your AVC as a tax-free lump sum. We can work that we can work that out for you. Okay, so heading towards the end. So remember, local government, you're the only public sector scheme that allows you to save this way. Employers have to choose to set up the AVC in this shared cost basis. That's what your employers have done for you. So if I look at the north, I said we've got people as far north as Aberdeenshire Council, Shetland Island Council, Orkney Islands Council, they don't have shared cost AVCs for their members. Highland Council are in the process of introducing them. If I look at Scottish Borders Council, Dumfries and Galloway don't have a shared cost AVC. You all work for employers that do, which is brilliant for you, because that means not only you saving tax, but you get to save the national insurance as well. I'm being completely sincere when I say this. If there's a better way of saving money for retirement, I don't know about it, and I'd be interested to hear from you if you do. How do you apply for shared cost AVCs? Well, you go to the avcwise.co.uk website. It's like any form you've ever completed. So name, date of birth, national insurance number, etc. So it might be useful for you to print off a payslip when you're setting up your AVC, and as part of the application form process, it gives you the links to Prudential or Standard Life, and choose the fund or funds that you want to put your money into. But again, remember what I said, don't get hung up on funds. Okay, don't get hung up on funds. Your reason for doing this is tax NI, the ability up to your limit, and retiring with main scheme to get the whole lot back as a tax-free lump sum. Okay, and really relevant at the moment, see when you go and look at a payslip after today, also look at your cumulative totals for the year. Look at what you've already paid out in tax and national insurance in this year. And for some of you, what you'll look to do is set up your AVC really quickly to catch your February and March pays, so that you make use of some of the tax relief and NI savings for this tax year. Because once you get to the 6th of April, this year is dead and buried, it's gone. You can't do anything about this year's tax and NI. You've got 2 months left in which you can do something about it. Your employer verifies your application, you get set up with Pru or Standard Life, and then you pay AVCs from your next available salary. Now, setting up your AVC online is the easiest way to do it, but if you would like to speak to someone from AVC Wise prior to starting it, you can do that over the phone in over 20 minutes. We do need you to do some preparation for that though, so get access to a projection of your LGPS benefits to your preferred retirement age. If you've got an AVC already, get an up-to-date valuation, print off a payslip, think about how much you want to contribute from your net pay, and you doing that prep allows us to then work out what can you have in your AVC as a tax-free lump sum. How much tax and national insurance can you save? We're not financial advisors, we can't advise you on investments, but hopefully it's just another step in the process here that helps you get to grips with what a good thing it is your employer has set up for you. Conditions and considerations. So remember, your main scheme benefits, although you're reducing your salary for the purposes of national insurance, it doesn't affect your main local government benefits. Your employer will not allow you to contribute so much to shared cost AVCs to drop you below national minimum wage, which for most of you is £8.72 an hour, or you maybe work for an employer who operate to Scottish living wage, which is £9.30 an hour. You're not allowed to go below those limits. Lower earnings limit I mentioned earlier, and linking into one of the questions from James, your national insurance, if you reduced your salary so much to below 6,240 a year, your NI would come down so much where it could affect your state pension. So for that reason, you wouldn't drop below that 6,240 year limit. And the vast majority of employers, if not all of them who are represented today in the call, will not allow you to drop below that lower earnings limit anyway, so you're protected. 3 allowances from the government to talk about. Annual allowance, you can contribute up to £40,000 a year to pensions and receive tax relief in your contributions. And even if you went over that limit, that might be okay if you've got unused allowance from previous years. And just by being a member of local government, you use up some of that 40,000 a year allowance. Something called the money purchase annual allowance. So if any of you are over the age of 55 and you've accessed a private pension in the last 5 or 6 years through the government's pensions freedom legislation, that maybe restricts what you can put to your AVC to just 4,000 a year. Also something called lifetime allowance, which is a value of retirement benefits that you're allowed to build up, and going over it means you could face a tax charge. It's a pretty healthy amount you're allowed to build up. In this tax year, it's £1,073,100. So as you can imagine, the vast majority of people aren't affected by that limit. But if you think you might be affected by annual allowance, money purchase annual allowance, or lifetime allowance, that's when we would encourage you to see a financial advisor. Remember, in your shared cost AVC, you can change your amount as often as you want. You can stop paying in, and of course, it would need to stop if you left your employer. Further resources after today, anything to do with your main scheme benefits, there's a local government website set up specifically for you, although it's undergoing a bit of a refresh at the moment, but a really good place to go for any main scheme questions. You might have a look at your last annual benefit statement, showing you what your benefits are worth. The last valuation was to the 31st of March 2020. And when you look at your local government pension statement, it also shows you what your benefits could be worth to your normal pension age. From the AVC wise, our resources, we've got some short explainer videos that sit in our knowledge hub. For example, we run these webinars regularly. So when we started running the webinars as a result of COVID, we had one, and now there are 7 different ones. So I've covered quite a lot today. You're in the longest one, the LGPS and shared cost AVCs, a recap, but we've got other ones there. So if it's useful for you to come along to other ones, dip in and out these as you see fit. My final slide before I invite James back in. If you want to request a one-to-one meeting with us to set up your shared cost AVC, you can email us. We've also got a live chat facility. You can phone us, the Knowledge Hub I mentioned. When you go into the AVC Wise website, you go in via your employer portal, and doing that gives you access to your employer's terms and conditions and frequently asked questions document. And then, as I mentioned, anything to do with main scheme, there's the Scott LGPS2015.org website. So I'll stop there for a second and invite James in to pick up any final questions.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, there's a few questions coming. So you've answered Suzanne's question about the reduction in national insurance contributions. Michael has a question. Does a tipping point arise when the age which one reaches relative to the state retirement age means that the merits of AVC are so reduced as to make it no longer worthwhile? Well, you answered that and said no, and Michael's quite happy with that answer. Then Ian asked a question, when you talked about investment, Stephen, what level of charges do these companies apply to managing these funds? Well, Prudential and Standard Life, not being charities, they do charge for managing your contributions, your money. Typically, those charges range between 0.3% and 0.8 of 1%, but the actual management charge for your AVC fund itself is contained in the fund options booklets at both Prudential and Standard Life. I want to add, however, that you do not pay any fees to AVC Wise for using our services. Our fees are covered by the savings your employees making by using our services. Then the last question from Michael, can you say more about the benefits of additional revenue through the AVCs at retirement for those who may not be interested in either early withdrawals or lumps? Well, Michael, yes, you are right. What you can do, as Stephen sort of briefly covered, is you can, at retirement, you can convert your AVC fund into income. And that's in one of 2 ways. The first way, give it to an insurance company. And that insurance company will then in return give you, as you rightly say, an income for the rest of your life that's liable for tax. Now, typically about 20 years ago, if you had a pot of, say, £100,000, that would have given you a pension income of £10,000 a year liable for tax. Now, if you're 65, that gives you about £4,000 a year. So that those rates have come down. So the actual rate or the conversion rate that you get depends on the rates in force when you come to retire, which clearly is in the future. So you can't answer it now. It's what's in force in the future. Similarly, you can also give your pot of AVC money to your local government pension scheme, and they will give you extra main scheme income for the rest of your life. And again, their rates can change. So you won't know that until you get to retirement age. Now, again, as Stephen mentioned, from our experience, the majority of people who retire do have it as a one-off payment because it is tax-free. And if you're wanting income from it, you can put that in the bank and just dip into it when you need it. Generally, we need more in our youth retirement than when we're in our 80s and 90s. But nonetheless, it is an option that you have. So when you come to retire and you have an AVC pot, you are given the income options. And if you want those, you can take them. If you decide, actually, that's not good value, I'll prefer the lump sum that's tax-free. And bear in mind, you're the only public scheme that allows that. That's when you choose that option at that point. There's no more questions, Steve, unless you wanted to add anything to what I've covered so far.
Yeah, I'll just bring things to a close. Thank you, James. And on that last point, yeah, although it's an option to take a pension, James, we've been around, we both worked for Prudential for long enough, and 99.99% of people with an AVC at retirement faced with using it to buy a pension that's subject to tax or taking it as a tax-free lump sum will take it as a tax-free lump sum. I mentioned my wife works in local government paying AVCs. I have no intention of that money being used to buy a taxable pension. It'll be to give a tax-free lump sum to help early retirement and spend that money when we've got the good health to do it. But the key point, which you made, Jane, you make up your mind at that point. So you've got all that flexibility. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope that's been of use. As I say, the clock is ticking a wee bit for the end of this tax year. That might be enough to get you over the line and get you taking action sooner rather than later. I hope you've properly understand and have got to grips with what a good thing your employer has done for you to set up your local government AVC so that you can save national insurance and top of the tax, which is just brilliant for you. So as I say, thank you for attending and live long and prosper. Thank you.